Hello and welcome to the VST Roundup. We have an exciting few games of basketball to bring you. We had the third round and the semifinals that we have to recap for you. There was some spicy moments, some excitement, couple upsets, and all around amazing basketball. And you guys did it. You packed the stands. We'll get in on that more. We want you to keep doing it. We'll start off. We're going to jump in with the boys, go all the way through from open to D5, and then we'll do the girls right after. And we'll let you know kind of what it looks like going into the finals next week on the weekend. Here we go. So in the open, you had the number 8 seed Westchester, fresh off of their upset of Narbonne, facing number 4 Taft. Taft did what they've done all season. Come up when they need to. It was a 55-46 win. Taft is into the finals. Birmingham, the number 2 seed, was hosting number 3 Fairfax. And this has kind of been the story when Birmingham faces Fairfax. They play a little tough, and then Fairfax comes away. 10-point win, Fairfax 68, Birmingham 58. And so the final is set on the 25th. It'll be number 4 Taft and number 3 Fairfax. You guys, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, in terms of Taft, it was a really great performance by Taft, especially down the stretch. That game was a dogfight, as we knew it would. I mean, these 8 teams in open on any given night, any of these teams can knock each other off. Westchester was game. They proved that win against Narbonne was no fluke, and they did everything they could. They pulled out all stops to try to take out Taft. They even grabbed, I think, a 45-44 lead late in that fourth quarter before Taft did what a composed team that's ready to take the next step does, and they closed that game out on like a 10 or 12-0 run to put that game away. So congratulations on Taft moving into their championship game. And as far as that Birmingham-Fairfax matchup, it was a rematch of last year's semifinal, and Fairfax did the same thing this year that they did last year, and that was kind of take it to Birmingham. Birmingham had some opportunities that they let slip in that game, and Fairfax moves on to the championship. I mean, when you talk about the top, especially the top 2, 3, 4 seeds in open, any combination of those two, you wouldn't have been surprised that they got there. You could make the argument that Fairfax was as good as Narbonne or Birmingham or Taft this year. So it's no surprise that those 2 teams are the last 2 teams left standing and open. What you got, Eric?
Yeah, great atmosphere at Pasadena City College. Once again, the city did come out for 4 great semifinal games and for the open boys and girls. And Taft closed the game on a 11-2 run. Bishop Rhodes had back-to-back highlight dunks at the end of the season, end of the game, to ultimately won that game. So, was it Bishop Rhodes? Sorry, it was Soldier Niles. My bad. So,
all right, and it sets up for an exciting final. Like Kenny said, it should be really close, really hard fought, because those top teams there, there's not too much separating them. And that'll take us into D1. D1, we had the semifinal of Venice versus Laces. And Venice kind of ran away with it. It was a low-scoring affair, 52-40. But Venice is in the final as your number 1 seed. And then in the bottom half, you had number 2 seed Grant against upset-minded Granada Hills. They were the 6th seed, fresh off of their exciting win over the number 3 Palisades. But this Grant team does what they've been doing for a long time. They hold on, they pull away. It was a 72-62 win, and Grant is looking for yet another city title when they face Venice in the finals. We'll start again with Kenny. What you got?
Yeah, when you looked at this bracket, you knew Venice and Grant were two teams that you could make the argument of a 1 or 2 wins might have slotted them in open. So you knew coming into this bracket, it was going to be a question of would there be anybody who could kind of get hot enough to maybe knock those two teams that had made an argument that they could have been open from getting to the championship. And you saw with Laces and you saw with Granada, they were upset-minded in the quarterfinals, with Laces kind of going on the road and getting that close win over Gardenia, and then Granada, like we talked about, going to Palisades and pulling that upset. But it just wasn't to be. These two teams have been worthy teams all season long. They've played tough schedules all year long, and they were battle tested ready coming into this playoff. So there's no surprise that the top 2 seeds are the ones that are left standing, and they're going to battle it out for the D1 championship.
Venice and Grant did meet earlier the year at Grant in a tournament game, and Venice walked away with the 67-63 final. So Grant really wants to get that revenge after having their game taken away from them on their home court. So
yeah, they would want that. But what you can argue at this point now, both teams are playing their best basketball. So it very well could be just as tight and almost a coin flip until you get out on that court and see who's just going to make the plays and who's going to walk away. That's an exciting one for me specifically. All right, that takes us into the D2 bracket. And in D2, you had upset-minded Cleveland trying to make a deep run. They prevailed over the number 1 seeded Rancho Dominguez. It was a 64-60 victory, putting them into the semifinals against the Southgate team that defeated Legacy 64-57. That matchup, unfortunately for Cleveland, was rough. Southgate kind of boat raced them. It was a 63-43 victory, and Southgate is in to the D2 finals. And then on the bottom half, you had a Bravo team that was the number 2 seed hosting number 7 Kennedy, and Kennedy was fresh off of a 1-point survival against University, and they turned that into a big win. It was a 66-53 win. Kennedy went into the semis to face Eagle Rock, who had just thumped Marshall 60-39. And they kind of repeated the step again in the semis. Eagle Rock took out Kennedy. It was a 68-58 final. So your final in D2 is a tournament rematch. You have Southgate as the number 4 seed and Eagle Rock as the number 3 seed. That's the D2 final. What do you guys got?
Heartbreak and dreams of what almost could have been. When you look at our Valley teams here in the D2 bracket, now what Kennedy and Cleveland will be able to hang their hats on is the fact that they cleared the way for Eagle Rock and Southgate by pulling those upsets in the quarterfinals. This Cleveland team, like I said, I think that this playoff is a bit of a preview of what's to come for this squad. I think they're going to be a dangerous squad going in the next season in the West Valley, and they kind of showed you their wares here in this playoff run, knocking off Verdugo Hills on the road, going on the road to the number 1 seed Rancho Dominguez and knocking them off before running out of gas against Southgate. And the same can be said for Kennedy. Kennedy were kind of an underrated team all season long in many respects. They survived University in that first game out, and then they went to Bravo and handled business and took out the number 2 seed before they eventually kind of ran out of steam against a very, very good Eagle Rock squad. So, congratulations are in order for both of those teams. Amazing playoff runs. Couldn't quite get to the championship, but I think that we'll be able to look at both of these teams' playoff runs and see that this might be a precursor of bigger and better things for them next season.
All right, and that'll take us right into D3. And the D3 action The only team we had left as a Valley rep was North Hollywood in the top of the bracket. No, sorry. All right, and that'll take us into D3. We had a couple representatives still standing going into the semis. You had North Hollywood as the number 5 seed. They got in, and they were facing Garfield in a rough match. Garfield was coming off of a big victory over Jordan, and they carried that momentum in. Garfield is into the finals after a 59-38 victory over North Hollywood. Now on the bottom half of the bracket, you had the number 2 seed Arleta running roughshod. They went into the third round against Northridge Academy and just laid waste. It was an 83-46 victory for them, putting the Arleta into the semifinals. And they were facing the Marquez team that did something similar, 81-62 over Hawkins. And so in the semis, you had Arleta and Marquez, and Arleta kept it going. It was a 73-59 win over Marquez. So your D3 final is set. Number 1 Garfield versus number 2 Arleta. What do you got, guys?
Yeah, when you look at the D3 playoff bracket, the two teams that are in the finals absolutely made statements in this playoff run that they were the two best teams here in this Division III field. North Hollywood had a great showing, posting wins over Vaughn, posting a couple of wins before they ran into a Garfield team. That's just sort of been a juggernaut throughout this playoff run. And on the bottom side of the bracket, you can say the same thing about Arleta. Absolutely, both of these teams ran roughshod over their opponents in this playoff bracket. Both Arleta and Garfield both beat their opponents by an average of 21 points through their first 3 games in this postseason. So this is a matchup that's sort of kind of been looming since they rolled the balls out in their opening round, and we're going to see what happens when these two Titans clash in the D3 championship game.
Arleta and Garfield met earlier in the season, and Garfield won 67-56 over Arleta. So rematch of the Cathedral tournament. So that's going to be a good one.
All right, and that takes us into a D4 setup where it's all city. The last Valley team we had got bounced in the third round, but we're going to run through it anyways because these brackets matter. Up on top, you had number 1 Sotomayor defeat number 9 University Prep in the third round. It was a 78-50 victory there. Then you had Canoga Park, who was the number 4 seed. They were hosting West Adams, number 5, and West Adams kind of ran them over. It was a 61-38 final there. So your top semifinal was Sotomayor and West Adams. Sotomayor kept it going. It was a 63-45 victory, and they're in the finals. Down on the bottom half, you had Middle College versus Animo Venice, and Animo kind of pulled off the upset. Sorry, it was a 62-57 victory there. Animo got into the semis, and on the bottom, Huntington Park put it to Valley Academy Arts and Sciences Voss. It was a 58-34 win, putting them into the semis. And that semifinal matchup on the bottom, Huntington Park defeated Animo 49-35. So your D4 final is Sotomayor as the number 1 seed versus the number 3 Huntington Park. Your thoughts, guys?
Yeah, not as much success for our Valley schools here in the D4 bracket as we've seen in some of the other divisions in the playoffs. Canoga, that game against West Adams kind of feels indicative of how the end of the season has kind of been for them, where just inconsistent up and down from one game to the next. Big effort against Diego Rivera, but then West Adams comes to town, a team that's kind of on their level in terms of talent and shots just wouldn't drop for them in that game, and the run kind of ends there. Same thing for Voss. We knew they were going to have a bit of a tough hill to climb, having to play against that Huntington Park team, and it kind of showed on the scoreboard as Huntington Park kind of cruised to a victory there. So that sort of ends our involvement on our end in D4. But Sotomayor and Huntington Park have definitely been the class of this bracket, and it makes a lot of sense that they're the two teams left standing, and I think there should be a very, very competitive championship game between those two schools.
All righty, and that takes us into D5, where one of the finalists is yet to be named as of this recording. That matchup is taking place on Tuesday the 21st, but we'll still jump into it. Up on top, the Port of Los Angeles dominated North Valley Military Institute. It was a 74-44 win in that third round, putting Port of LA into the semis. And the other third round matchup that had a Valley team, Triumph versus New Designs. And New Designs University Prep was not able to really pull it off. 56-43 Triumph into the semis to face off against Port of LA. And that was where the Valley run ended in D5. Port of LA came out on top 56-45, punching their ticket into the finals. Now the other semifinal that we're waiting on is University Pathway versus New Designs Watts. And that is the number 2 seed versus the number 14 seed. And good luck to both teams. One of you will be playing for a D5 city title, which is exciting. Nice.
Yeah, and like I said, same sort of the same here in D5 and as in D4. Not as much success on this end for our guys, although Triumph took a good run at it. I mean, they posted 2 victories in the D5 playoffs, but they ran into a Port of Los Angeles team that, quite frankly, probably talent-wise, it's probably not necessarily D5 level, which is why they were the number 1 seed, and they've done what you should do if you are a team that maybe is playing in a bracket that's below your level of talent. Posted 2 blowouts in the first 2 rounds, and then they had a little bit of a tougher time with a Triumph team that was hot coming in, that had a really good season. So congratulations to them for getting all the way to the semifinals in D5. But Port of Los Angeles was just proved to be too strong. They'll be a tough out in the championship game for whoever survives between University Pathways and New Design Watts.
Port of LA will be able to host in the D4 and D5 finals. They're going to be at home sites. So Port of LA goes from a winless season of 0-11 from a season ago to 11 wins going into the championship game, and they also get to host a city championship game. So that's going to be pretty impressive. From winless to a city hosting. So.
No, that's exciting. That's a hell of a turnaround. And it speaks to the coaching staff, the amount of work they put in, the girls, the boys, everything they've done on both ends. And kudos to them. Just excited to see teams kind of turn it around. But with the boys done, that takes us into the girls bracket, and there are some interesting stories coming out of these brackets. We're going to start up top with the open division, and number 1 Granada Hills, as we said last, they held on. It was a 43-37 win over King Drew, putting them into the finals. And number 2 Westchester held on against number 3. It was a 56-46 win there, 10 points. So the initial projection is alive, guys. We had a Granada Westchester final kind of on our end, and that's what we have. Kenny, you had Westchester winning, but what do you think so far going into the final?
Yeah, this bracket to me was wide open, no pun intended, because of the caliber of teams that we saw, especially when we got to the semifinals and you had those top 4 seeds kind of survive and go chalk, even though King Drew had to took a last second, almost miraculous 3 to kind of get past Birmingham. But we saw what Crenshaw and Westchester did in their first round game. It sets up for an incredible championship because you're talking about a Westchester team that beat Crenshaw 3 times this year. And we talked about how hard it is to beat a team 3 times, and they managed to do it. That team has been awesome all year long. And Granada Hills, they've been the standard in the open division. And, they had a tough opponent in San Fernando where they had to deal with their size, and they dealt with it. They had a team in King Drew that was scrappy and defends really well and can hold opponents under 40 points on any given night because of how well they defend and how well they can shoot the ball from the outside. And they figured out how to way to get past them and get it done. So you're talking about 2 teams in this final who have a combined record of 53-5 this season. These are absolutely the 2 standard programs in the city section this season, and this sets up for a real heavyweight clash for the Open Division Championship.
The Granada game and the Westchester games were pretty physical. Granada was up 12-2 before King Drew went on a big run to take a 22-20 lead. Mariam Bocos at the end, let me pull up the numbers, had 17 points. Double-doubles machine. Crystal Pineda had 14 points, 14 rebounds, and had a big stop at the end to get that nice defensive charge to ultimately seal the win. And in the Westchester Crenshaw game, it was pretty physical and low scoring, and Westchester prevailed. And Granada and Westchester, this is a rematch of last year's semifinals that Granada had at their place taken away from them at home. So, and both teams returned a lot of talent from a season ago.
You got revenge on your mind if you're Granada Hills, coming in off of last season's semis. But that takes us right into D1. And there were a couple of exciting matchups at that point. Up on top, you had number 1 Hamilton hosting number 4 Pauley, designated home team. And this one was scrappy, and it got physical, and Pauley was able to prevail 9 points. It was a 56-47 final. So Pauley is playing for that D1 title. And on the bottom, Laces ended the Cinderella run of Cleveland, the number 10 seed. It was a 63-45 win for Laces. So that D1 final, Pauley and Laces. What do you got, guys?
Yeah, very, very competitive, very physical, emotional games in here in this D1 semifinal at Birmingham, hosted at Birmingham. And I'll get more into the Pauley game because it's a game that kind of deserves to be talked about in terms of the high drama and the caliber of the game of the matchup. Pauley prevailed. It was tough, but they got it done and they move on to the championship. Same can be said in that Cleveland Laces game. It was a very emotional, very, very hard fought battle. Laces quality just proved to be too much in the end. I'm sure Cleveland will probably kick it itself for the amount of turnovers and just missed opportunities they had in that game. Like I said, they got down big on the scoreboard. They fought all the way back in the second half. They got it down to 7. And even then, they had opportunities to kind of make that a real tight ball game towards the end. But at the end of the day, Laces kind of won, and it sets up for a very, very intriguing championship game between Pauley and Laces, especially with some of the circumstances coming out of that Pauley Hamilton game.
So Laces comes into this final as the winners of city championships for these seniors of Kenna McConaughey, who won as a freshman as a sophomore. Unfortunately, lost at Birmingham in the Opens as the 7th seed a season ago. So they're trying to get their third reigns as senior captains. So,
all right, that's an exciting matchup to keep your eyes on, and we'll have Kenny go a little more in depth on that Poly situation right before we wrap up. All right, and in D2 now, you had number 1 San Pedro going over Carson in the third round. It's a 69-62 final, putting San Pedro into the semis. And the other third round matchup up top, you had Bravo outlasting Southgate 41-39. And so that semifinal matchup, San Pedro and Bravo, San Pedro took it 50-39. So the number 1 seed survives. They're in the D2 finals. And on the bottom, number 2 seed Chatsworth was facing number 10 Kennedy. And Chatsworth prevailed. It was a 56-48 win there, putting Chatsworth into the semis. And then they outlasted an upset-minded Wilson. It was a 60-58 final. So you got a number 1, number 2 final here in D2, San Pedro and Chatsworth. It's kind of the way we thought it might go. But your thoughts on this one so far?
Yeah, so with Verdugo moving from D2 to being a D1 team this season, you kind of knew the way that this kind of played out, or the way that this bracket shaped up. It was kind of, okay, San Pedro and Chatsworth, you two don't have to deal with Verdugo. Can you put it all together and then fight it out for that D2 championship? And both teams have managed to do so. And maybe in some different fashions. With San Pedro, they took care of Roosevelt in their first game out. They had a tough matchup with Carson, a team that they have. There's a lot of familiarity there from being from that end of the city. They handle business there, and then they handle business against a tough Bravo team to find their way to the championship. For Chatsworth, after their first round matchup against Northridge Academy, for them, it was simple. They needed to survive a revenge tour, because when they matched up against Kennedy was a team that they played earlier in the year. But Kennedy was also a team that had added a couple of pieces and whereas the different team the second time around. That game was a heavyweight clash, and Chatsworth kind of handled business to kind of get past. Same thing with Wilson. Wilson was a team that played them tough earlier in the year. You knew you were going to take their best shot when you saw them, and that game was a back and forth tussle. And Emily Cuevas came up with the big putback at the end of the regulation to kind of put them through to the championship. So sometimes it's as simple as survive in advance. But it says a little bit about this Chatsworth program and their resiliency and their resolve under Coach K, what this team has begun to build over the course of the last few seasons. And his seniors now on the cusp of kind of finishing the deal and going from a team that 5 years ago got beat by Granada. We're getting beat by teams like Granada Hills by 70, to now being on the doorstep of getting another opportunity at a D2 championship, one that they had last season, but they came up short against Verdugo. So they'll be ready. That this is a game that they desperately want, but it won't be easy against the San Pedro team, who also have their own designs of winning the D2 championship. So it'll be exciting.
And I wanted to give a shout out to San Pedro, who won the Marine League for the first time in 37 years. They are led by Nolani Reagans, who's been quite a menace this postseason. We haven't seen that much of her, but I'm sure Kenny probably saw them last year when they played Verdugo. So if Kenny has any thoughts of San Pedro and what he saw from last year against Verdugo.
Yeah, this game, this championship, which I'll get into more of when we kind of preview and hold the different championship games. But this is a game very much that comes down to Nolani Reagans versus Madison Guerrero. They're the two leaders of their teams. They're the players who have the most on their shoulders. And quite frankly, they're probably the two players who are in the running for the D2 player of the season, player of the year. So whoever has the better game probably not only walks away with the championship, but might also walk away with individual honors, because that's how important they are to the success of their team. So Nalani Reagans is a very fast, shifty guard. She's tough to deal with, especially in the open floor when she gets ahead of steam. She's a very good finisher around the basket, but more importantly, she kind of runs that team. She's the heart and soul of what San Pedro does. So it's going to be interesting. For Chatsworth will know you got to stop her if you want to stop San Pedro. So it's going to be interesting to see.
All right, so that's an exciting D2 final coming up. That takes us into D3. We're in the third round. We had an all-valley matchup with number 2 Vaughn versus number 10 Triumph, and this one was tight for most of it. It was a 65-56 victory for Vaughn. So number 2 ranked team is going into that, got him into the semis. Their matchup was against Contreras, the number 3 seed, and it was a 50-44 win for Vaughn, placing them into the D3 finals. They'll be facing George Washington Prep, who defeated Harbor Teacher 39-27. So that's your D3 final. What do you guys got?
Yeah, this bracket came down, was always about what would George Washington Prep do on the top end of that bracket and what would Vaughn do on the bottom end of that bracket, because for all season long, these two teams have been on a collision course for the Division III championship. We know I've talked about Vaughn and how dynamic their backcourt is. They weren't going to allow them to lose, even though you kind of could see how the trail of the road was headed for them, that for them to be crowned D3 champs, they were probably going to have to go through Contreras and George Washington Prep to do it. The first leg of that in the semifinals was a tough matchup against Contreras, and they got it done. Well, by hook or by crook, you get it done and you move on. And in the top half of that bracket, George Washington Prep has been as impressive as we thought they'd be through their first 3 matchups in this postseason. So it won't be easy. Vaughn definitely has the firepower to get it done, and we're going to see what happens when these two teams take the court on Thursday night.
Yeah, in the Vaughn semifinal against Contreras, it turned into a very physical game, and this was the first time that Contreras was able to face a real tough task, because they've been having easy competition all season. So this was their first time facing a good Vaughn team. Unfortunately, in the end, Vaughn prevailed. So,
right, and that's another exciting one. Taking us into the D4 bracket now. There were quite a few matchups that left us, excited for what is coming. We'll jump right into that third round. You had number 1 ranked Valley Academy of Arts and Sciences, Voss. They defeated Alliance Marine by 10. It was a 42-32 win, putting them into the semis. And number 4 Community Charter out of Lakeview Terrace was trying to make an all-Valley semi matchup there, but they fell to New West Charter 29-27. Then down in the bottom, you had Robert F. Kennedy survive. Correction. They defeated East Valley pretty handily, 52-20. Clarifying that got me. It looked like it was a 52-50 final, but 52-20. Robert F. Kennedy is into the semis after that one, and they faced number 6 seed Larchmont, who defeated number 3 Wish 47-42. But Robert F. Kennedy took care of business pretty handily. It was a 41-20 victory for them, putting them into the finals. And up on the top, Voss outlasted New West Charter 30-24. So your D4 final is Voss and RFK. Take it away.
Yeah. So the thing that stood out when we were going through the brackets, or when I was kind of going through the bracket to sort of determine or decide who I thought would win here. The thing that stood out from the minute that the brackets were announced was that I didn't know who in this entirety of this bracket could play with a team like Robert F. Kennedy, who, to me, in my opinion, is punching below their weight class a little bit here. This is a team that was causing havoc that wreaked havoc last year in Division III. And I know they had some losses and there was some turnover with the team, which is why they were kind of considered a D4. But there's enough remnants of how good of great talent on that team from last season that you just kind of saw that what ended up happening here is what we thought would happen. Their math and science, they beat them by 35. East Valley, they beat them by 30. Larchmont gave them a little bit of a game. They still beat them by 21. So they've kind of run through this bracket. So when you look at the fact that Voss, and to give them to give them a bit of a pass when you have to see Sun Valley and Alliance Marine your first two games out, from familiarity breeds content, but also it breeds competition because these are teams that know you. So they kind of struggled to kind of get past some competition that, had scouted them pretty well. And then, they handled business against New West to find themselves in the championship. But it is going to be a tough road to hoe. If they win this championship, that by goodness, they will have to earn it because this Robert F. Kennedy team, for all intents and purposes, is a monster that got placed in a bracket that they probably could have easily made a run if they were in Division III. So Voss has their work cut out for him here.
Voss is back in the not Voss, sorry. Voss is going to be in the finals at home on Friday at 7:00 as they take on Robert F. Kennedy, who are making a finals appearance for the first time since being in the D4 final at Granada Hills against Verdugo Hills, which was Verdugo Hills' first championship, part of the three-peat. So, and also since the 2020 season that the Robert F. Kennedy had their finals appearance, they've had a coaching change. And Jerison, let me make sure I get this name correctly. Jerison Hernandez Lobos has taken over the program. So will Robert F. Kennedy get their first championship win since the late 2010s? All is in good hands on Friday night at Voss.
Right. And that takes us into a D5 final where Valley teams were trying to make a press to get in and make some noise, but ultimately they were unable to do so. So that third round matchup up top, you had number 1 seeded Fremont defeat Annenberg. It was a 58-27 final there. And the other third round matchup up top, you had Angelou defeat Gala 57-40, setting up that top semifinal. And Fremont kept it rolling against Angelou 48-36 to punch their ticket into that final matchup. And then on the bottom, you had Camino Nuevo just take apart new designs. It was a 31-18 final. And the final Valley rep that we had standing in D5, NVMI, lost to Fauché. Really close matchup. It was a 40-39 final, setting up that bottom half of the semis, Camino Nuevo versus Fauché. And another close matchup, Camino Nuevo 31, Fauché 30. And that has your D5 final ready to roll. We've got Fremont, number 1 seed, and they're facing Camino Nuevo. What do you guys got?
Yeah, in D5, we lost a lot of our representation, or the representation that we did have pretty early on. I do have Fremont winning here. But there's not much to say other than the fact that when you look at these brackets in totality, I think it says something about the level of competition that we have here in the Valley, that you literally have to get all the way to D5 before you don't find a Valley representative in a championship matchup. I think it says a lot about the level of competition on our girls' side here, that we literally have a Valley school in every championship game except for D5, which we knew going into it was a bit of a crapshoot in terms of, you know, you're splitting hairs between these teams here. So, you know, I just want to say, even for teams like in VMI who put up a good fight here in D5, you know, we just got to continue to keep building on these programs and continuing to support our young ladies, because there is a lot of good basketball coming out of the Valley, and we've seen it here in these playoff brackets. They've shown themselves well just about in every division. So congratulations to the Valley as a whole, and and good luck to Fremont and Camino Nuevo in D5, and seeing whichever team gets to hoist the championship banner there as well.
Yeah, nothing much happened in D5, but I had Fremont and Nuevo advancing, and they lived up to what we predicted in the playoff preview. So, hey.
Yeah, exactly. There's good basketball all around. When you get to this point in the season, when you're in the finals, you've got a lot to play for. So, like we were saying before, we're here to show the love. You guys keep spreading love. There was a lot of good basketball that was being played, and that is only going to continue into the finals as we break down those 10 matchups, 12 matchups, open through 5. And there's going to be some heartbreak. There's going to be some celebration, but keep showing out, keep filling these gyms, and let's make something happen.